what I'm going to do is to just briefly, very briefly, review the, I suppose you might say, the politics of the area. Then I'm going to tell you about the voyage that we made, half made, on the 29th and the 30th. And then I'm going to finish with some general comments about the state that we are in now and how we've got here. This country, well, it's not a country really. I call it, in fact, the Zionist entity, because it's not a state. States have fixed borders and they obey international laws, sort of. So that's what I call it, the Zionist entity, whenever I write about it. I write about it quite a lot, I think about it a lot too. This, in fact, was a map of about 2002. It's changed, in fact, the original map, in fact, shows about 6% of the land area of what was called Palestine, Mandate Palestine, was actually owned by Jewish people, some of whom had lived there, in fact, since the time of Christ and before, original Jews. So you imagine all that being green, apart from a few little patches around Haifa and around Jerusalem, places like that, a few spotty white patches. It turned from being almost entirely Palestinian in its ownership to this in 2002. And this is in fact now worse than that. This is more split up. Gaza in fact regained a bit of its Palestinian land. These settlements were withdrawn with great flourish by Mr. Sharon, but this is more fragmented. And it now in fact is the actual land available to Palestinians is about 15%. But in fact every square inch of that 15% is occupied. So that's that. I was galvanized by the bombing of Afghan people, some of the poorest people on earth, by B-52s from 32,000 feet. I was so outraged that I decided to act. And I knew that Palestine was the hinge of humanity. I knew that partly from Palestinian doctors who worked with me. And I then, in fact, you know the story, eventually, very quickly, I chartered a cargo vessel, and 3 Britons accompanied me, and 50 tons of good food and other things, to Ashdod, the voyage starting on the 1st of February 2003 and finishing 16 days later. And since then, apart from a lot of work on Iraq, I've spent almost all my time, I really mean all my time, working for justice in Palestine, knowing that every step I took forward, someone else was pushing them back 50-50. And that's how it is, particularly at the moment. Now, I've been to Palestine 3 times last year. The second time was with Sue. She came to Gaza with me the first time, but our entry was delayed by 3 days because they were killing then. They killed 120 people over 3 days, including 57 children, and one, in fact, was a baby that was still in utero. Anyway, we got to Gaza, and as always, we found a great welcome in people's homes. We did a bit of work for our Dove and Dolphin charity, more than a bit of work. That was the second time. The third time was a group of doctors. There were a few amongst them who were possibly Zionists. It was hoped to show them what was going on, and they might in fact influence other people. I think it's a fairly slim hope, actually. But it was a meeting, it was a tour of 10 days, which was meant to include 3 days in Gaza. Haza, as they call it. Anyway, I spent about 6 weeks speaking, writing to the Israeli occupation force, as most people in Palestine prefer to call it. They call it the IDF, Defense Force in Israel. But I did notify them of our intention of entering Gaza, the 16 doctors and other health workers, so we could spend 3 days there. Anyway, we were refused entry, as was Oxfam and other personnel. Why should that be? Because they were gearing up for a war, and they wanted to keep it quiet and keep people out. So we didn't spend our 3 days in Gaza. That was my 3rd trip last year. A good group that started 2 years ago have been wanting to break the siege of Gaza by sailing boats from wherever, in fact it turns out to be Cyprus, to Gaza, to the fishing port. And I've been associated with them for those 2 years. Therefore I get their emails, and I saw they put forward a voyage on the 6th of this month, in fact today, forward in view of the hell being let loose in Gaza. So with less than 24 hours notice, I packed my bag, Sue helped me, thank goodness, sort of get organised, and I caught the plane via to Larnaca. And I arrived about an hour before the boat cast off. So now we're on to the voyage. It was on the 29th. 7 o'clock on that evening that we steamed off in this 50-foot motor cruiser, quite a powerful thing, but pretty uncomfortable, and to sail about 200 miles to Gaza. And most of us were sick within about 2 hours. I certainly was. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, when we're about 60 miles from Gaza and about 60 miles off the Israeli coast, the entity's coast, I saw two searchlights behind us, which I recognized as being those of the so-called Israeli Navy, fast patrol boats which have guns and the lot, including water cannon. And they played these things on us for about half an hour. In the dark, there was a moderate sea, in fact more than a moderate sea, and we were steaming along about 12 knots going to Gaza. They put up some flares, and I think they also put up some tracer bullets, but they went up in an ellipse. They weren't directed towards us at all, but they were tracer, I'm sure. Anyway, after half an hour, the lights went out. They were coming up to us and then going away again. I thought it was trying to intimidate us. There was no conversation with the master, who comes from Portsmouth, Dennis Healy. Anyway, 10 minutes of darkness, and then suddenly the most almighty crash in the bow of the boat. In fact, two crashes and a third crash within about a second of each other. And I thought we were just going to evaporate, actually. It was amazing. I thought the boat was breaking apart. It was a hell of a row. The master said, "We've been rammed." And I could hear him up the companionway. He shouted that. And I thought we were going to sink, because the bow dipped with the collision, with the ramming. I have to be careful of my words. And I imagined a hole in the bow, and I imagined it scooping water. We were doing 20 knots down the waves, I understand from the master. And no one had life belts on. Half the people were asleep. Two of them were non-swimmers. A wonderful person called Cynthia McKinney, who you'll hear more about. She stood for presidency this time. But the Zionists have made jolly sure she got nowhere in the States, because she speaks her mind about Palestine and all other things as well. Lovely person. She couldn't swim, nor could Quiver Butterley. Anyway, the life vests were deployed to the 16 crew, 2 crew and 14 passengers, and it then became evident that we weren't sinking. But I thought that we were going to drown. And I had a puffer jacket on, other people had similar sort of clothing on, and I think a life vest with a puffer jacket in a pretty stiff wind, in the dark, that we were going to meet. Well, I was going to die. And the fact is this: the Mayday went out. There was no reply. And there had been no communication. No, no. Contrary to what the Israelis are saying. Yeah. Then I understand what happened. And there was a conversation. The captain of whatever boat it was that crashed us, he had his lights off. He could not be seen. We were fully lit. Lights in the saloon where we were sitting, puking, and there was also lights in the wheelhouse and all proper navigation lights. He accused us of being involved in terrorist activities. We had 3 tons of cartons on board that had all been checked by the Cypriots. In fact, the Cypriot government had given most of it, unlike our own bloody government, which would give nothing to people over there. The Cypriots had done. He then also talked about subversion, and he also said he was going to shoot the boat. Later on, he did say, "Did we need help?" Well, you don't usually take help from someone who's put a knife in your guts. So the master quite rightly said, no, he didn't need help, because we established then that we weren't sinking. It had 8 bilge pumps working, that happens anyway. They were going anywhere, and the boat stayed. So we weren't taking water. The Israeli captain told the master to make for Larnaca, in other words, to turn tail. We're only about 60 miles from Gaza. We were 53 miles off the Israeli coast. That's about 33 miles outside an international limit. But that's irrelevant. You don't ram boats unless you're at war. Anyway, the fact is we had not enough diesel to go back to Larnaca, 150 miles. So that conversation took place, and anyway, it was agreed we should still steam north, actually, which we did. And the master said he had to put into Lebanon for diesel, which we'd have to do anyway. But anyway, it was agreed quietly that we'd stay in Lebanon, and thank God we did. So eventually, these vicious boats, and the even more vicious people inside them, who followed us the next 3 hours as we steamed towards Lebanon, dropped away, as we were then taken over by, we were then in fact accompanied by a Unifil, quite a big warship that is trying to keep the peace between Lebanon and Israel to the south. And then eventually the Lebanese, quite near Tyre, the Lebanese Navy, the Lebanese army took over and led us into a very jubilant crowd. It was rather lovely actually. After all that feeling of loss, I wasn't going to Gaza. I was going to Gaza to be with my brothers and sisters there. I was going there, in fact, to also to offer my services as a surgeon for whatever they wanted, and also to represent my charity, the charity I founded, because the welfare of children is central in that, in fact, and by Jove, they need some welfare now. So that's what was driving me to go there. I wasn't going for free Gaza. It's important that I was a passenger, so to speak, with free Gaza. So I think that's all I should say, in fact, about that. We were 3 days in Lebanon. We met the president of Lebanon, who's recently changed, thank goodness. We met the head of the army, because they let us in, and we also met the Minister of the Interior. They were rather sort of, well, they were nice meetings. We shook hands, and we exchanged. And some of us, like myself, spoke a few words. And eventually I flew back with great difficulty on, what day was it? I forget now. Saturday. Arrived home on Saturday. Pleased to see my wife again, and Dartmoor, and to be with the world again, but not deterred one jot from doing what I've been doing. Because we're in big trouble in this world. Very big trouble indeed. Now, I want to say a few more words before I finish. How long have I been? Not too long. I'm going with a fair lick. All of it's been on the cards, what's happening now. It's all been there. No one wanted to know. I've been writing and talking, and a lot of other people have tried their very best to get our anaesthetised nation, who prefers to look at Anne Robinson and celebrity dancing or whatever, rather than thinking about people not so far ago, or anywhere else in the world actually. There's all sorts of people actually who are suffering, but I think the Palestinian people have suffered for the longest. No question about that. And suffered terribly too, actually. Terribly. There was an article by Ali Abu Nima, who in fact is one of the, hate the word, the Palestinian diaspora in America. He writes superbly. He's one of the editors of Electronic Intifada, and on the 29th of February he wrote about Israeli minister threatens Holocaust as public demand ceasefire talks. It's an excellent article. I recommend it. Those with computers, if you in fact look up Electronic Intifada and then that title, Israeli minister threatens Holocaust, you'll see it all there. But there's a few points in it which are very interesting actually. I was reading it, just read it tonight, but I read it at the time, and that's why it's filed on my computer with other vast megabytes of evil. I'll just extract a few things. This was this. Israeli officials began damage limitation efforts after the country's deputy defense minister, Matan Vilnai, threatened Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip with a Holocaust. Did you remember that? You didn't, did you? See? But he said it. Amal remembers it. Comments came a day after Israeli occupation forces killed 31 Palestinians. That's when Sue and I were waiting in Jerusalem for them to stop the slaughter. 9 of them children. Pardon? Anthony, of course he was. He was with us. 1 a 6-month-old baby. There was more to follow. There was more the next day and on March the 1st. Israel claimed that the attacks. This is the important some of the important things. Israel claimed that the attacks were in retaliation for a barrage of rockets fired by resistance fighters in the Gaza Strip, which killed 1 Israeli in the town of Sderot. Sderot, incidentally, is a Palestinian town, isn't it, Mahmoud?
Yes, it is.
They never refer to that, actually. It was, in fact, occupied illegally after 1948. It was within the sort of Palestinian settlement. So that's another little piece of a lie which the BBC will go on repeating. They said the rockets were in retaliation for the extrajudicial execution of 5 Hamas members carried out by Israel on Wednesday morning. Israel occupation forces have killed more than 200 Palestinians since the US sponsored Annapolis Peace Summit last November. In the same period, 5 Israelis have been killed by Palestinians. Speaking to Israeli Army radio today, Vilnai, is it Vilnai or Vilnai, I imagine? The more Qassam fire intensifies and the rockets reach a longer range, the Palestinians will bring upon themselves a bigger shower because we will use all our might to defend ourselves. And sure does mean Holocaust. Although they tried to alter that in later statements. The BBC discussed it. The BBC said it's a term rarely used in Israel outside discussions of the Nazi genocide during World War II. Do you understand me? So Vilna was using a word which Israeli Jews, and other Jews perhaps as well, actually, or other people, would use in reference to the Nazi Holocaust. I'll try and jump this a bit. They tried to say that he was using in the sense of a disaster or a catastrophe, and not in the sense of a Holocaust. Holocaust, actually, you may be interested in this, it's Greek and Hebrew. It's Hebrew enough. The kaust means a burnt sacrifice, and it really means nothing but the smoke. Now, incitement to genocide is a punishable crime under the International Genocide Convention, adopted in 1948 after the Nazi Holocaust. A man called Greg Stanton, I haven't read the book, I can't read much, defined 8 stages of genocide and warned, and it set out a number of warning signs of impending genocide, which include dehumanization of potential victim groups and preparation, whereby potential victims are often segregated into ghettos, deported into concentration camps, or confined to a famine-struck region and starved. Does it sound familiar? Vilnai's threat, however, Vilnai's Holocaust threat, however much Israeli officials attempt to qualify it, this is Abinima speaking, fits into a consistent pattern of belligerent statements and actions by Israeli officials. Israel has attempted to isolate the population of Gaza, deliberately restricting essential supplies such as food, medicines and energy, a policy endorsed by the Israeli High Court. Listen to this. There's always a pretense of a democracy. It's an ethnocracy, actually. There's always a pretense of law. Supreme Courts they've got and High Courts. A policy endorsed by the Israeli High Court, but condemned by international officials as illegal collective punishment. Now, this is interesting too. On the 28th of February, Villeneuve's colleagues added their own inflammatory statements. Cabinet Minister Meir Sheetrit stated that Israel should hit everything that moves in Gaza with weapons and ammunition, adding, "I don't think we have to show pity for anyone who wants to kill us." My last extract from this essay by Ali, who I know a bit, correspond. The US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who is loathed in Palestine, for good reason, has blamed the escalating bloodshed entirely on Hamas and has failed to call for a ceasefire. This echoes her support for Israel's merciless 2006 bombardment of Lebanon, which she notoriously celebrated as being, do you remember it? The birth pangs of a new Middle East. In that war, they flew 32,000 sorties against that. Now, what we're describing as a mindset is not confined to the people we're talking about in this in Zionist entity. There's a hell of a lot of them across the channel, and there's a lot of them up in London too, in fact. And that's why I feel very depressed when I go to London. And I can't go on marches now because I feel this oppression the nearer I get to Westminster. To give you the idea of the mindset, which there are ethnic connections, or at least there are religious connections to this. The Shiva Rabbinical Council had a meeting, when was it? Anyway, it was about a year ago. This is on my computer too. I'm told by an anti-Zionist Jewish friend, in fact the father lawyer who's just phoned me, Moshe Makova, that they don't actually apply much, they don't pay much attention to this. But this will give you some idea. The Yesha Rabbinical Council announced in response to an IDF attack in Kfar Kana that, inverted commas, according to Jewish law, during a time of battle and war, there is no such term as innocence of the enemy. So if in that school, UNRWA school, where they killed 40 today with probably a thermobaric missile, I've written about that too, if you'll find that on my website, about the weapons. If that happens to be children inside that, they are just the innocents of the enemy. All of the discussions on Christian morality are weakening the spirit of the army and the nation, and are costing us in the blood of our soldiers and civilians. Now, two more segments from my mind before we go to question time. I send this quotation quite a lot to people. There's a man called Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, Milton Mayer, who published a book in 1955 called "They Thought They Were Free," the Germans, 1938 to 45. He studied what was happening in Germany. Now, I have for quite a long time been saying we have reached 1938, and I'm saying now that we've reached 1940. And still people don't look and listen to me necessarily, but there's no waking up going on. I have a feeling that what's happening in Palestine will wake people up. This is an extract from Milton Mayer's book. It's very important, I think, because it encapsulates what I felt was happening, and I couldn't easily say. What no one seemed to notice was the ever-widening gap between the government and the people, and it became always wider. The whole process of its coming into being was above all diverting. Think of the presidential election in the States. It provided an excuse not to think for people who did not want to think anyway. It gave us some dreadful, fundamental things to think about, and kept us so busy with continuous changes and crises, and so fascinated by the machinations of the national enemies without and within, that we had no time to think about these dreadful things that were growing little by little all around us. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, or on occasion regretted, that unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what all these little measures must someday lead to, one no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. Each act is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for one great shocking occasion, thinking that others, when such a shock comes, will join you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act or even talk alone. You don't want to go out of your way to make trouble. But the one great shocking occasion, when tens or hundreds or thousands will join with you, never comes. That's the difficulty. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring. The houses, the shops, the jobs, the meal times, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. You have accepted things you would not have accepted 5 years ago, a year ago, things your father could not have imagined. When we'd been round, and before we'd been round, I thought we might be, I don't know, when we were going to meet some press anyway. There was a lot of activity in Lebanon about involving the press as well. I think actually my phone was interfered with, as was Cynthia McInnes, who's a very expert spokeswoman and fearless. She missed about 23 interviews, I think. And my damnable mobile had money running through it. I never got anything out. I couldn't speak out. That was, in fact, the system. I knew that. But what I had in mind, I was trying to get a few words together when I had to speak to reporters or whatever. Say when I do. And the first thing, as I said, that we have to confront barbarism, and I mean confront it, not sit on our backsides and let someone else do the confronting, like DSH. The second thing is to stand up for the law, both national and international. And the relevant quotation to that is from John Locke. I quoted today to a reporter. Bet you won't, well, perhaps you might use it. John Locke, who was the leading thinker of the Enlightenment, in 1675, I think it was thereabouts, he said, "Where the law ends, tyranny begins." So that's why I go on flogging on about Dr. David Kelly, because we haven't had an inquest on Dr. Kelly, and you'll hear people infer Muslim connections to the bombings of 7/7 in London, and yet there's been no inquest on any of the victims, either the alleged perpetrators or any of the 52 subjects who were blown apart. And all we've had is a 32-page commentary from a Home Office wallet. That's the law in England, as we stand today. And the third thing I got down here, which I was going to say to the press in Gaza, or in Lebanon, I did say it actually, is cherish all children everywhere. That child is my child. Thank you. So you can see, in fact, actually, it's south-east, the heading, and you can see that when we in fact told this oppressive creature that had rammed us, or his fellow officer, inverted commas officer, and he said, "Steam back to Larnaca," it wasn't, in fact, we're up at this point here, it wasn't that much out of our way to steam towards Lebanon. All right? That's one of the fast patrol boats. I'll describe it. It will do over 45 knots. There's about 3 of them actually. I know, I did actually look this up. I wrote a piece about them. It has where mums are hunting around for a cupful of kerosene to do a bit of cooking in the beach camp where Ismail Haniyeh lives, the premier, a very good man who I've met twice now. This thing has 10 tons of fuel in its bilge to power its a jet boat. It uses jet, it has the water jets that push it along. It has a self-leveling gun on the front which the computer controls, so they're able in fact to shell, as they're doing now, the people on the Gazan coast fairly accurately because the gun stays dead on its target. So that's one of the patrol boats. And that's one of the said boats. That's probably the gun I'm talking about, actually. I'm not sure. No, but there it is, firing away. Very good at firing stuff. If you go down to Rafah and you look at the cannon pockmarks on the buildings there, the apartment blocks and the houses, and the rifle shots and the shell fire, great holes from the shells, you will count thousands and thousands of pockmarks. This is the hole on the boat. It gives you some idea. I'm sure, in fact, it approached at about 45 degrees on the bow side, and the bow of the boat rode up to there, I should think. It shattered this side of the wheelhouse, and all the glass. We couldn't go down to the heads for pee because there was glass all over the place. And the master was over this side where the wheel was. I think they probably, well, we think he might have chosen this side, so it didn't do. I don't know. I think that's a foolish thing. I'm quite certain the intention was to sink us and to drown us. And I hadn't actually discussed that. Why should they want to drown 16 people with David Halpin, with the grandfather and other people like that? The reason is that I think that Cynthia McKinney, interestingly, all of us were going, interestingly actually, because there are quite a few Jewish people going on previous boats. We were going to speak to Al Jazeera probably. They are in Gaza. They are uploading film up to the settler. Otherwise, we wouldn't see much of what's going on. They didn't want any more of that, and particularly people who could speak very fluently and tell the story. The second thing is that there's a third reason I thought the other night, and I've forgotten it again, but the second reason is quite important, and that is that they hate people helping Palestinians. Yes. Amal nodding. That is true. You wouldn't believe it, would you? But you know, when I've been asked questions at Lod Airport, as I prefer to call it, as I come out, they said, one big sort of Shin Bet chap said, why are you going and helping in the accent? Why are you going and helping Palestinian children? Why aren't you looking after Israeli children? He said. I said, I said I had to be careful. I said, I wanted to go home. I thought that they were probably looked after fairly well. Absolutely. So those are the two reasons, and the thing is that both Cynthia McKinney, she's known to them because she's spoken. The AIPAC and other people have tried their very best to ruin her back in America, and I do speak out as well. If you look at my website, you'll see. You know, it's not. I speak my mind about the injustice and the cruelty, and they don't like it.
Do you think they were actually looking for your specific boat? When you were quite far from Gaza, do you think they knew that you were doing this journey? And
they know they have every mechanism under the sun for finding out. And they knew the boat was coming. It was widely publicised. They knew it was on it. They knew that it was carrying supplies, medical supplies, humanitarian supplies to Gaza. So they knew all that, and they would have been tracking his way out. They probably had. I'm trying to forget what other mechanisms they had. You see, we were putting out.
So do you think those boats came specifically for you?
Yes. Yeah, no question. No question. They came hunting us. And I should add this actually. Why would they do it? Why would they do it there? It was dark. It was dark. It was well out. And I haven't looked. I meant to look at the charts, but I know there's a trench. There's a very deep trench in the Eastern Mediterranean, which goes down to 3,000 feet. And that boat, if that hull had been a bit, this is the other thing too. If it was a glass reinforced fibre boat, the master said they'd have sunk it straight away because it shatters. This, in fact, was a marine ply, quite strongly made, an Italian boat. And it had more elasticity and more strength in it. But if there had been a big hole in the bow, and as I say we're running down the wave at 20 knots, we would have scooped the water. There were 840 horsepower engines times 2 in the bilge, very big engines. We would gone, the boat would have gone like a stone. Most of us would have been up, floating, for a time being. And my own view is, if you wanted to sink us, then you probably would have run us down, in fact. What if we were in life jackets? And there might have been about 2 bodies about 4 weeks later.
That photo makes their claim that you rammed them look pretty ridiculous, really.
I know, but you see, this is what we're dealing with. They've said they've given 3 different reasons, apparently. They were running around. They were, I think, they were very unhappy about what had happened. They knew what had happened, but I think they were unhappy that they'd been trapped in their immense cruelty. My life and the life of the other 15 people counted for nothing. That's the fact of it. And people have to understand it, actually. That's what we're dealing with. Yes. And it's the same. It's not. There are the Talmudic bits to it, but the thing is that our country, at whatever headquarters they are in Norfolk or something, we're doing similar things to Afghans and Iraqis. Yes. So I'm making this quite plain. This is not just Israel. You know, America has been bloodthirsty for fact since its inception. They've been, as you know, I won't go into much detail. Now, this is a photograph. Phil. Well done, Phil. My son's friends come along, and so has my son Andrew. But Phil took these photographs. He met us when we came off the boat on the 16th of February 2003. And Phil took some pictures. And I thought I'd put that picture of some happy children. You know, in spite of all, they're smiling, and they look pretty happy. And you do find lots of happy children there. There's a lot of children who are still have been affected by the terror, as they keep calling it, that's been meted out to them. There's a lot of adolescents wet their beds, as one small example of it. But a lot of them, in spite of it all, and in spite of reduced educational opportunity, have great resilience, and there's lots of young folk doing their very best, and I meet them, being medical students and what have you. And remind me about the university before I finish. So that's just a happy shot. The images you're going to see now, you're not going to like. Next one. This is children in Lebanon 2 years ago. They've been partly incinerated. We don't know whether they've been using depleted uranium bombs in Lebanon. And but I'm not sure whether that was from that, because you get an intense fireball, very, very tremendous temperature. Not the hottest temperature, but you certainly get some. But also thermobaric weapons have a fireball. And they're being used all the time in Gaza. And some of the Gazan photographs show people with black faces. Next picture. This is a current picture from Gaza of a whole, I think, a family. I didn't actually look at the caption. I imagine a mother with a baby and 3 little ones. Is that what it shows? I can't see it clearly.
Yes, the 5 sisters.
And I think they put great attention to the Israelis did emphasize this. Is this the Hamas move? Yes. Next one. Now, I'll just show you this one to make a point. This is what's going on. I've never seen such propaganda from the BBC as in this so-called war. It's not a war at all. It's a massacre. Wars are between men with sort of equivalent weapons. This was a passing out parade for police graduates, I think. This would have been, I can't show the detail, I can. The leg is at a sort of, it looks like a banana. That was probably a thermobaric weapon because it's broken his bones in various places. That shows you what there's about 13 people there, I think, actually. There were more outside that field of the camera. How many Israelis have been killed by Hassan rockets in the last missile? You call them missiles sometimes. Does anyone know the answer? They started firing them in... What? How many?
Four recently, 17 altogether.
Yeah, 7 altogether. And when did they start firing them?
8 years. 8 years?
2002, I think it was, if you look at Wikipedia. Okay, so 17 Israelis were killed by this terrible weapon which has been terrorizing Sderot and Ashkelon and Ashdod. And, pardon?
Some of which are Arab Israelis.
Yes, I know, yeah, but they're people. They're people. That was over 6 years. This security compound, they call it. Now you call your police station a police station, don't you? This is a security compound in the Orwellian BBC and other C4 setups. And they kill in a few milliseconds about the same number of people in a few milliseconds. Get the picture? Next one. We're talking about brutality of the greatest order. This is a most unpleasant image, but I want to show it to you because I want you to compare it with the 4 happy children you see at the start of this few photographs. This is, well, I'll just show you. This is in Iraq, 10 days after, you've seen this before, haven't you? My friend from Sudan. This is 10 days after the invasion of Iraq by the Judeo-Christian coalition, the Bush, Blair, and I think actually, whatever they say, Israel, and others, a lot of European countries actually. And this boy was sleeping in his house with his mother and father and other relatives. And he did actually remember there was, I think, two booms or blasts or noises. This is a village south of Dawania, south of Baghdad, the cradle of our civilization. He survived. His mum and dad and 10 others were incinerated. You can see that his legs are intact. This is an operating theatre, as you can see with his catheter underneath this at the top. His head and neck are untouched, upper arm similarly. His forearms and hands have been incinerated. You just see little bones sticking out of there and there. And across here, there's this goes down about an inch when they came to excise it. What was his name, do you remember? Ali Abbas. You remember, 2 people remember. Ali Abbas, next picture. That's the view from the right side, as you can see. I'm quite certain, interestingly actually, no one has come to agree with me on this issue, but I'm quite certain this boy was subject to the most intense thermal radiation from some weapon that we haven't been told about. I'm quite sure of this. Because there's a band, you see, like that, and you can also see it's tapering where the radiation was something like a window aperture that he was radiated through. That's why other parts of him escaped. But we don't know what devil's weapons they're using. Someone I had some rubbish about microwave weapons. They are using, actually, they say.
Yeah.
Anything, yeah, I know, but I'm sure this isn't that. Microwave just causes heating of the whole tissue. Now, Ali Abbas, I'll come and stand over here so I can see his face, actually. Ali Abbas, with his little stumps on his, where his arms used to be. What do you think he's saying to us? He's a very beautiful boy, isn't he? I think he's probably saying, what have you done to me? And why have you done it? And the thing is that Ali Abbas is speaking for thousands and thousands of thousands of children with Romania. He came to an English private school and has done very well. He plays football very well, apparently. He's a very happy boy. He's been on radio recently, as I'm told. I get to hear that. But with nothing to be glad about. He's terribly scarred, and I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want him to be armless. But you know what happened last year? He used to have an uncle come with him to school, so he could hold his in his willy and put him in the right place and wipe his bottom. Last September, he had to change his uncle to someone else, you know, and he wasn't given a visa. That's sort of isn't that a nice little British twist?
No, it's just so sick, isn't it?
Thank you very much. The United Nations represents all nations of our world. It's dominated by the Security Council, which is dominated by the United States and Israel. With Britain as collaborated quite often. And the United Nations should be saying straight away, stop it. So any discussion about land routes or sea routes is irrelevant in my view. All that it shows, so far is it is actually collaboration of United Nations as well. Now, there is a difference. The General Assembly takes a different view of this, and in fact, one of the, I'm not sure whether he's the President or Chairman of the General Assembly, they've been sidelined. So the nuclear power states have the power in the Security Council, with a few others voted in occasionally. But the one of your, a Catholic actually, I think, Father Miguel Brockman, has stated about 3 weeks ago very plainly that genocide is being done. So there is the knowledge and the will in General Assembly that should stop this. But the thing is that the United Nations has been hobbled by the Security Council arrangement, which has no laws. As you know, Chapter 7, they are able to in fact wage war, even though that, to start wars, even though that counters the Charter of the United Nations, which does not allow any war, even in a defensive war, you're meant to stop after 2 weeks and take stock. So Iraq, whatever they say, was totally against international law. Iraq was a war crime. That's why my recent piece on Blair, I refer to him as the paramount war criminal, which he is. The pretext, what we've seen in Iraq and now and in Afghanistan and in Lebanon, it's all to do with pretext. Yes. And of course, launching weapons from domestic environments or police stations or whatever, that's the pretext all the time. You'd think they had an endless supply of Hassan rockets. But that was one reason why they bombed the Islamic University. And when I saw that, I know it's a building, but I got to know it quite well, and I really love the people. The president's a very good man called Chaff. I'll just tell you what sort of things, what they're like. In February last year, the Fatah element, or elements of them, the Presidential Guard, ransacked the place, set fire, fired rocket-propelled grenades into this wonderful university, because they hate Hamas so much. $30 million worth of damage. And when we were in there about 2 weeks later, our doctor's group, Tony was one of our 7, do you remember him? Mm-hmm. He said, Kamalain Shah said, it is in the past. There aren't too many people in the Western world who behave like that in the face of this, but people don't know that one of the first reactions of Islam is to forgive. That's something else it comes across in all the vile anti-Islamic propaganda which is pumped out, including, I'm sorry to say so, in the church. But that's what actually happened was that they've actually flattened this university. It started off in tents about 50 years ago. They studied in tents. They were so keen to learn. And it went on in tents for some time, gradually built it up. They had a lot of money from Qatar and elsewhere. And it has 20,000 students studying there. They're not all in hijabs. It's not they give the impression it's a plural university, although it's the Islamic university. And they started a medical school 3 years ago, and I used to speak to the medical students who are a bright lot, terribly keen to get on, and now it's rubble. There's no words for them. Can you understand? You know what I feel about this. Terrible. That's to start rebuilding from scratch. And Mahmoud there, who's a senior lecturer in the English department, who teaches English literature and drama to his own educated youngsters, has in fact he's had all his opportunities the next few years flattened by heathens. Any questions?
Tony Blair is a member of an organisation, Labour Friends of Israel. Yeah. How can he possibly be involved in any peace negotiations?
Exactly. Well, sir, we've tried very hard with that. There's a fellow called Stuart Littlewood who is in a group of us, and we've tried in all ways possible to highlight this. People who don't know ought to know that 80% of the Tory MPs belong to Conservative Friends of Israel. The first Friends of Israel was in fact Liberal Democrat, and if you look at their website and their founding statement, it is treason. Treason. It's dual loyalty. we call it treason in the old days. They'd be locked up in the Tower of London. The Labour friends of Palestine, of Israel, it's not easy to find out who are members, but interestingly, there's a new Security Committee of the House of Commons. Fuchs is one. I forget the other one actually because I am tired, and it's about a month since I remember being told about it. But this is a committee that has access to all security organs in the United States. The 5 of the committee out of the 9 are friends of Israel. We don't think that any Labour person gets to be a minister unless they've been a member of Labour Friends of Israel. That's the fact of it. And in the Foreign Office, Miliband, Howells has come out as you know. But anyway, there were 4 other ministers under Miliband. All of them were friends of Israel. So when I write my letter to my local MP, who's also probably a friend of Israel, Younger Ross, he writes a letter to another friend of Israel, Kim Howells, who writes back a letter about 10 weeks later in response to yet some other blood-curdling incident that's the picture, sir.
Right.
All right? Thank you.
It's just one brief comment, David.
Yes.
About what's going on now in Gaza and Palestine in general. The Israelis can kill our kids and children and destroy our buildings. And of course, this is painful. But regardless of this pain and this suffering, they can never destroy our will or determination. We are still steadfast and patient. And we would continue the road till having our freedom, whether sooner or later. Regardless of this imperial support from USA and unfortunately from UK as well, the Israelis, we would continue the road.
Thanks, Bob.
Till beginning of the
I know you.